All right, so to start, or rather just a quick recap, is we got movement working with action codes. So I added in jump for an action code, and we tested that the rollback was working, especially when you would like climb over obstacles stuff, and that was doing great. So in this stream here, we're going to go from TCP to UDP. Now we're sending data every fixed update, or at a fixed update interval, and doing that over TCP is going to be bad because if you get a little bit of a lag spike or anything like that, it's going to really choke out your network, because TCP is reliable, so it's going to keep trying to resend packets until they get through. While on UDP, we can drop the packets and it'll only, it doesn't care, it doesn't keep trying to resend it, and it won't clog up your network. So the first thing I'm doing is getting a UDP transport, and I'm going to be using Ignorance, which is by Coburn on the Mirror team. So I'm on their GitHub right now, which is Software Guy, and I'm under Ignorance here. I'm going to click the releases link down here on the right, and I'm just going to grab the latest one. If you hear a bit of noise in the background, I apologize. We're setting up Christmas stuff, so it might just be a little noisy on occasion. So don't worry about that, I suppose. Now on the plus side, I got my graphics card, so I have everything I need now. Don't need the demo for my new computer, that is. So I don't have to deal with that anymore, and that's great. I do have to still build it though, which requires waiting for everything to arrive, but at least it's all on its way now. So right now I'm importing that new transport. It should only take a second. Only going to take a second. Come on. There we go. Now I'm going to set that new transport on my network manager, because right now it's using telepathy, or whatever it's called here, and I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to use Ignorance threaded. So I'm going to type in Ignorance threaded, and I'm just going to leave everything at almost everything at default. I don't need statistics. I'm just going to turn that off. And I'm going to drag this transport up into my network manager, so I am now using it. And I also want to make sure, and it should be set by default, but I'm going to make sure there's 2 channels with 0 being reliable and 1 being unreliable. That's very important. Thanks. Yeah, that was a challenge getting that graphics card. It was a struggle. So let's go into the code. Actually, I did mention that I'm going to be doing this in milestones, or I updated my supporters anyway that I'm going to be doing this in milestones. So basically what that means is first I'm going to have many different examples of this. I'm going to have it using an action code with TCP, action codes with UDP. So the UDP transfer or conversion alone is going to be a quote milestone. No, this is live. This is 100% live. And I'm going to, after that, do another milestone. So anyway, as I was saying, I'm doing milestones. So what I need to do first is I'm going to actually separate my scripts here. So I'm going to do a new folder. And I'm going to take everything but the fixed update manager, because I think that's going to stay the same. Let me just look at here. Actually, the maths and stuff too, I don't need to move in here. I do need states. I need all this stuff. So I'm going to move all this stuff under the milestone TCP. And like I said, this is just organizing it so I can have copies of every script so that you guys can compare the differences if you like. This isn't going to take but a second. I'm just adding on namespaces real quick. I don't know if you can add a underscore under names, so I'm just gonna do it like that. Okay, like I said, this is just going to take a second. It's not gonna take long at all. All right. So I'm missing something. I forgot to change this one, I think. Oh, it's missing that. Okay. All right, so all I did is I just added on to the namespace. Nothing fancy. I'm gonna make sure everything compiles. I think we're okay, but I'm just gonna make a build real quick. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to copy that entire folder, and then I'm going to rename the namespace to milestone UDP. That way I can keep them separated. And we're going to basically, it did build, so I'm gonna go and close it. We're going to reuse the code we have now. We're not gonna be like rewriting it or anything like that. I just want to organize it so that you guys can see the differences. So I'm gonna duplicate it. It's just going to take a second, and this is going to be milestone UDP. And now I'm going to go in here, and I'm actually going to close out everything. And I'm going to reopen stuff up. And I'm going to rename these, just changing the TCP to UDP. And this is the one we're going to be working off from. This is kind of like making a local backup instead of on Git, but I'm gonna keep everything different inside the folders as well, so that way that you guys can compare the differences. Just wanna make sure everything's good. Looks okay. What am I missing here? Oh, nothing, it just took a second to compile. This is the wrong motor. Okay, we're good. All right, so now we're going to start working off from the UDP milestone. So under milestone UDP, it's the same exact code that we've been working off from all this time. I'm just breaking it into a new section. That's a really broad question, Ulysses, and I can't really answer that because there's, like I said, it's a broad question. It doesn't really say anything specific. So the first thing I need to do is I need to make my commands or RPCs, remote calls, etc. I need to make the ones for movements unreliable. And I actually did this already with this one. It's probably just out of habit. But let's go ahead and just do it to all these. Unreliable, unreliable. And right now, I'm pretty sure the only thing with remote calls is in the motor. So yeah, you can see these scripts are very basic. Not really a lot to them. This is just a smoothing script to smooth the graphics for the desyncs, but not really related to the motor. So all in all, this whole motor is, the motor logic itself is only about 327 lines, but a lot of it's comments, so it's not really too difficult. So now let's work on UDP. So right away, I technically made it UDP because I went to the commands here and I put channel equals 1, and as I showed you on the network manager, channel 1 is unreliable. So right away, that makes it unreliable. Now, the problem is we're going to have dropped inputs now that we made it unreliable. So what I need to do is I need to actually send inputs in redundancy. So what that means is basically I'm going to send the last 3 inputs per packet. And you can do 3, 5, 10, whatever. If you have a higher tick rate, you probably want to send more. I'm sending at a 50 FPS tick rate, so 20 milliseconds. And I found that 3 has been really good. But games, I know that games like Rocket League, they run 128 frames per second for their tick rate, and I think they said they send 10. So it might vary depending on that. And basically what we're doing is we're not only going to send the most current input with every send, but we're going to send the past inputs as well up to that number. And that way the server can get those inputs in case they dropped in a previous packet. So to do that, I actually have FPS land as a reference because I did that in FPS land. So I'm going to open up FPS land real quick. Or rather open up the script for it. All right, so let's see what we've got here. You don't really have to worry about any of this. This isn't something you don't have to read through all this and try to figure it out or anything like that. I'm just going to be using it as a reference. So let's see. So as you can see, I'm sending my inputs here on FPS land as an array. But if I go back to the project we've been working on, it takes only one state. So what I need to do is I actually need to convert this to an array. So I'm going to do that, super easy. And then just rename it to states to show that it's plural. And you're going to see some errors because I've got all this and this, and I'm like trying to add a single state, but it's an array. It's not working. So we're going to have to work from that, of course. The first thing I'm going to probably do is show you how to add the states to the motor states collection. Now, if I go back to FPS land, I have a couple checks in here, and let's see what's going on. So basically what this is doing is if the user has a high latency, then I just simply set the input as no input, and that will force a response back to the client, locking them in place. This is just because I don't want the player moving around if their latency is really high. This is probably unique to FPS land because if you have like a 400 ping, I don't really want my players running around with a 400 ping because it disrupts everyone's gameplay. So then I go to right below that. Here's where I add the range, and this is what I was talking about, where I just add the range instead of adding one input at a time. So let's go ahead and just copy that real quick. So I'm going to do, instead of just add, I'm just going to do add range, which will add the entire collection of states that I pass in. And right now I have the count here. If I receive more than a certain amount, it's going to drop some off. Now, this might be a problem because this was under the assumption I was getting one at a time, but now I could get multiple at a time, and that's going to definitely cause an issue. Now I'm going to just take a look at my code here real quick because I think what I want to do is I'm going to be doing this different than I did it in FPS land. So basically what I do is I check through each input, and if the time is less than the last processed input, then I ignore it, I bypass it. The problem, this works fine in FPS land because of how I set it up, but if I can't do that here after I get the inputs because it processes them in order, and there's not really any checking of that. So I'm actually going to do that check here, and just to elaborate what's going on, because I know I'm kind of jumping around, is I'm going to make sure that I get the states, and when I get the states, I'm only going to add the ones that I haven't received yet. So for example, let's say under perfect conditions, the states are arriving like this. So I'm going to get 1, 2, 3 from the client. And then the next packet, I'm going to get 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to get 3, 4, 5. So what happens is, let's say I get 1, 2, 3, and I go, okay, none of those have been processed or added yet. So I'm going to get the next packet and it's going to say, well, the last one I got was 3. So I don't need that. And I'm only going to add 4. And then when I get to the next packet, it's going to say, well, the last one I got was 4. I no longer need that. I'm only going to add 5. And that will basically sort it out to ensure we're not adding redundant states. Now, one thing I have to consider is states possibly being out of order, and it should work all the same. So let's say that, let's say I get 2, 3, 4, and the last state is 4, and then it's going to get this next packet, and it's going to be like, okay, let's see, 1, 2, 3. None of these are after 4, so I'm just going to ignore all of these. Just going to ignore them. Now, in this case, what's going to happen is I'm still going to have 2 and 3 because it was sent previously because of the redundancy. So dropping this isn't actually going to hurt anything because I still have those. So this will work in the sense it will protect against out of order packets as well, only processing the ones we have. But with that said, we need to make a new variable to track the last state that we processed or got. So I'm going to go up here under private, and I'm going to go under here, and I will do, actually, you know what I could do? I don't even have to make a new variable for that. I can just I could just do this. Oh, this is just for client host stuff. I don't really like client host, but I put that in there just to show you guys how you would, avoid running commands on client host. So only for client host. There we go. Now let's do if received client motor states dot count is greater than 0. So more than likely the server is going to have already received states. The only time this isn't going to be true is if it's like the very, very, very first packet being sent through. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically say, if there's a count on here, I'm going to do uint last index equals received client motor states, received client motor states dot count minus 1 dot fixed frame. I'm actually going to rename this to last fixed frame. So I know that this is going to, once I'm done with all this, I know it's going to add my stuff in order. So everything is going to be added to my motor states in order. So I know that the last one added will always have the most recently received fixed frame. So what I'll do is I'm going to get that last received fixed frame here. And I'm actually going to make this up here, last fixed frame, and I'm gonna make it -1 to start because, oh, it's a uint. I can't make it -1. So I make it I'm gonna make it 0 to start, and then I'm just going to do, and this might actually drop the very, 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 very first input sent, but I'm not gonna really worry about that because it's gonna happen immediately and no one's gonna notice. So I'm gonna do for I through states dot length. So now I'm going to go through every single state. I'm going to do if states I dot fixed frame is greater than last fixed frame, then I'm going to take this bit here and then I'm just going to add states I. So basically, if that state being received is more recent than the last one processed, then it's going to add it to our client received motor states. Very simple, fuss-free, nothing really challenging going on there. So let's just add some comments. Set the last received fixed frame for reference. Okay, so now I'm going to type this out. Go through every new state, and if the fixed frame for that state is newer than the last received fixed frame, then add it to motor states. And that's what's going on here. And now all I have to do from this point is I'm going to actually add a check. I don't think this would ever happen, but I'm just going to add a check anyway. If states equals null or states.length equals 0, then return no states to process. This should never happen, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. And now I'm just going to go down here. And the maximum received client motor states, I think I'm going to keep this at probably what I have it at 10 right now. I'm going to keep that at 10. That'll probably be fine. Like I said, if your game has a higher tick rate, you probably want to increase that. And you probably also want to increase how much you send per command, but we haven't went over that yet. So I'm actually going to do that now. So right now, if I look at this, we're only sending one state at a time, and that's the most recent state. Well, let's go take a look at FPS land real quick. Where is that code at? Gotta find that code. This is on the server. Let me just go to void fixed update because that's where it is in FPS land. All right, so here's where I generate the past few states to send. And I'm just going to copy this just real quick to show you. Okay, and I'm going to drop it in. Of course, there's going to be errors. So at FPS land, I just want to point out that I'm adding to the local client states here, and then I'm preparing them to send to the server after. And I'm doing the same thing here. I'm adding to the local client states here, and then I'm going to process to send them here. This is the code I just dropped in. I'm going to explain what it now does. So only send at most up to cached inputs count. Basically, I need to reward this to be more. Only send up to at most client motor states count. And basically what we're going to do here is if we only have 1 or 2 motor states cached, we obviously can't send 3. Like maybe we'd like to send 3, but we can't send 3 if there's only 2 cached. So that's all this check is for. So this is just the target array size, which is how many states we're going to send. And now we're going to do client motor states dot count. So we're going to send at most up whatever is currently cached on the client, or 1 for the current state, plus how many past states to send. And this is code from FPS land. This is just how many past states to send. We don't actually have anything for that yet here. So I'm going to go up, go to private const int past, I'll just say past states to send, simple. And we can do 2 or 3 or 4. I'm gonna send 3 past states. So that means I'm going to be sending a total of 4 states. I'll have the most recent state as well, 3 past states. Maybe I'm probably going to rename that in a second here. How many states or how many past states to send to the server? Actually, I'm not going to rename it. I'm just going to leave it. It's fine. All right, so now I just need to update this. And to go over this one more time, is the target array size, which is the array we're going to send of our states, is going to be a minimum of however many states we have queued currently, or rather stored, which could be 1 or 2 or whatever, or it's going to be 1 for the existing state up to the maximum of past states. So in this case, it'd be 4. So it's either going to be 4 or the minimum of this right here. And now we're going to make an array of the new states to send. And this is client motor state that we're going to be sending. we're going to fix my typos. States to send equals new client motor state target array size. So we already know how many we want to send, so we're just going to make an array to populate that value. All right, so now I'm going through the length of the target array size, even though I could easily just use the size of states to send. It doesn't really matter, but this is actually slightly more performant because I'm not trying to pull the length property on the array. So now I'm going to add the states to it. So I'm going to do states to send target array size -1 minus I equals, and I'm going to explain what this does in a second because I know it's kind of confusing. And I'm going to do client motor states dot count -1 minus I. So basically what this is doing is it's filling the array of states, and it's going to add them in order from the array of, or the list of client motor states. So for example, let's say on client motor states I have, let's say this is what I have for client motor states currently. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be reading it in a fashion so that when I set it to states of send, it will be adding 6, 7, 8 instead of the first one. So I'm basically starting from the end of the client motor states, and that's how it's working. So I know the math looks a little confusing, but that's essentially what's going on. And now all I need to do is I'm going to process locally my current state, the one that I just generated, and then I'm going to send the states to send to the server. And that should be it. I now have redundancy sending because I'm sending multiple states per send, and I'm just going to add a little bit of debug here just to show you. Let's see, states to send length. Assuming I did this right. Again, this is live, and I've not done anything outside of what you've seen. So fingers crossed, right? Just making a build real quick. I'm going to test it out. I think I'm going to fire up Clumsy as well. All right, so I have Clumsy going with 75 millisecond lag. Let's go ahead and I'm going to start the server on here real quick, and I'm going to do the client here just so I can see that debug is printing. Okay, so it's not printing at all. That's probably not a good thing. Not sure what I overlooked. I mean, it's staying in sync, so something's going on. You know what it is? You know what it is? I'm using the old motor. I didn't move the prefab over. So just now kind of realizing I should probably do this here. And I should probably also move the prefabs into it. And make a new folder for scripts. And this isn't anything you have to do. Again, this is just trying to separate stuff. And I'm going to also have to move the scenes over. I completely overlooked that as well. So just bear with me a moment here while I set this up. Why is that in there? That's not supposed to be in there. I'm now making a mess of everything. It's all right. I'll have it organized in just a second. All right, so I'm gonna go to my the scene I'm currently in real quick under the TCP scene. And I'm actually going to just very quickly undo this. Don't worry about following along. I'm just fixing my mistake here by overriding the scene. Basic rigid body TCP. Reload. There we go. Makes sense now. Basic rigid body UDP. Open that sucker up. And now I'm going to go ahead and add ignorance. Oh, ignorance is back in because I didn't actually modify this one. All right, so now I do need to go to my player prefab here, and I'm going to remove the motor because this is the TCP motor. I got 12 and 8 as my rate, so let me just remove that, and I'm going to go to scripts, and I'm going to drop on the new motor. Trying to get it, there we go. 12 and 8. So this is the new motor, and just to prove it, I'm going to open it up. And you can see that it is the milestone UDP motor. And if I were to look over here, you would see that it has all the new code we just put in. So now I do need to go to my network manager and I need to drop in the prefab that I just updated. Just gonna double check everything. Okay, now I'm going to make a build. If I go to my console and I hit client, everything's moving. It feels normal. I'm going to pause this real quick. So right away, if I go back to the code here, you're going to notice that it says states to send length. So that's how many inputs I'm sending. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4. That makes sense because as I said, it's only going to send what's available in the unprocessed states or the client motor states. So it's sending up to 4, which is exactly what I said because I set the past states to send to 3 plus the current state. So that's looking good. And the reason it says 3 here is because when the server sends back a response saying, okay, I've processed up to these states, then it's going to remove the states processed from the client motor states. And there's no reason to send that because the server processed it. So why would we have to send it redundantly? There's absolutely no point. So I turned on Clumsy real quick, and I'm going to go back here, and I expect this to continually send 4 because of lag. And my guy just teleported because I had the simulation paused. All right, so it looks like it's doing okay. It does feel a little not great. It could be because either I am processing too many states on the server. Like for example, I'm tapping jump once and it's going up twice. So that's not good. So it could be either doing that or it could be, yeah, something's not right. Although it does appear to be sending the past states. So I'm going to do another debug here real quick. String builder. I have a feeling the server is processing too many states. Let me go back to that real quick actually. Okay, so I do see an actual problem here. Maybe. Let me just look at this. Yes, I do actually. I feel like I should be checking this inside here. So let's say something like this. Okay, so the last fixed frame is 0 by default. If received states is greater than 0, then I'm going to set the last fixed frame to whatever the last entry is that we've added to the received client motor states. And the reason for that is because after I do this check here where I say, okay, if the fixed frame in the current state we're checking is greater than the last fixed frame, then add a new one. And we want to refresh that every time after we add the entry. So it's a for loop. So it's going to add it and it's going to rebuild the last fixed frame. Let's see if that fixes it real quick. And if it does, great. If not, I'll have to investigate further and see what could be going on. And I can actually just run this as server so I can do them side by side now. Okay, I still have some latency going here. And it's still really jerky. So I don't know if it definitely seems like it's sending them faster than normal, like the movement. It just sent jump multiple times. So something funny is going on at the very least. Now, I'm going to assume it's happening on the server side because if you look whenever I jump on a client, you can see it jumps normal height and then it shoots back up. That would suggest that the server is probably running the logic twice. So let's see if we can compare the two here real quick. It looks like to me that the client is running it once, and then once the server replies back, it's kind of shooting up to catch up to the space. But if we watch the server, it almost looks like it's just kind of running it once, like it's interpreting it as one jump, trying to get it to repeat it here. You see how the server is more fluid, but the client like jumps up and goes back. So I think the client's trying to catch up to what the server is essentially. Okay. I just kind of realized what might be the problem, another problem here going on. I do think I'm still right in that assessment. Now, remember when I said, oh, I don't need to use a variable because I can just pull from the last fixed frame here. What if there are no frames to pull from? Then it's going to be 0, and then it's going to say, oh, well, all the frames are a new frame, even though they're not. They're probably not, even though they've probably been processed. That's because I remove entries from this as I process them on the server, so that very well could be causing problems. So just to do a quick test, I'm going to do debug log last fixed frame. And I have a suspicion, I hope I'm right, that the server is going to occasionally print out 0 here, which it shouldn't be doing, but if I'm right, it will be. So let's try that real quick. Ah, did you see it? You see that? I don't know if you guys can catch it, but there's definitely some zeros printing out. So that might be what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and make that adjustment real quick. So let's go over to the code here, and I am going to do a new variable after all. Private uint last processed. Actually, let's do last client state processed equals 0. Last fixed frame processed from client. Okay. So if I go back down here and I lost myself. Here we go. So what I'm going to do is instead of doing all this, I'm just going to do if states.fixedFrame is greater than last state processed, then I'm going to add it to the list. And now I'm going to do last client state processed equals, and states, I can actually add it. I can actually do it from the last one added to this now if I wanted to. So I'm actually just going to do that. So I'm going to set it to the last entry I added to here, which should be good. When I say processed, it means received. So I'm going to actually just reword that. Last client state received. Let's give that a shot and see what happens. Another possibility is that the client is sending them out of order, like in the wrong order. So for example, it should be sending like 1, 2, 3, and then 2, 3, 4, and etc. But maybe it's sending like 1, 4, 3. I don't think that's the case. That code was pretty straightforward, but I'm gonna check if we still have problems. Okay, I can tell you right now that the movement feels better, like way better. Maybe I should turn on latency because that's gonna be an issue. Still feels better. So it seems that was indeed the issue. Everything's moving really great, and just to prove that this is working, I'm gonna raise my ping up. You'll notice when I hit jump here on the client, that's gonna take much longer to run on the server. So everything is working. Now, let's set this back to a fairly normal ping. 75 is actually high. This is 150 round trip, but just for the sake of testing, why not? I'm gonna add a drop chance of 10. So now we're actually dropping packets. And if you look, even though I'm dropping 10% packets, which is really high, by the way, packet drop is usually less than 5%. And I would argue that even in today's modern world, that's really, really high. So I'm dropping packets, and I know you can't really tell, but the movement still feels like dead on perfect. And you'll notice that it's still 1-to-1 on the server as well. So our conversion to UDP at this point is actually complete. We're sending packets with redundancy, and we're dropping packets that we need all the packets, but we're dropping packets to show that it is working. And I'm gonna go crazy here, and I'm just gonna drop like 50% of my packets just to show you that it is working. So by dropping 50%, there's a really good chance you will see disruptions because that's insane. So you see how it's being a little funny now. Maybe you can tell it's kind of jumping around. Just a fun test just to see if this does make a difference is I'm going to go over here, and under my past states of send, I'm going to bump this up to like 20. That's really, really, really high. And I'm going to bump this up to 30. Again, really, really, really high. But I'm just going to make sure it's working. And there may still be some disruptions, but again, I'm not really concerned about it because if someone's dropping half of their packets, there's something seriously wrong with their internet. So I'm not worried about that at all. It's just for the sake of testing, just to make sure everything is working as intended, you know? It's kind of like when I showed you in the first demo where there was 1,000 ping on the client. And for the most part, it was very smooth, but every once in a while when I get near the edge, it'd be rough. But that's like expected because they're on 1,000 ping. So I can tell you now that the movement is pretty good. I can feel a little, tiny bit of weird behavior. You can kind of see it too. But again, I'm dropping half my packets, which is insane. This is never going to happen in like a real world scenario. You're not going to have to worry about people playing on a connection like this on a regular basis. And if they are, they shouldn't be playing because it's not really acceptable. But you can still see even then that it's moving really good. So I would say mission accomplished. We have added UDP support. It is working fantastic. I'm going to set these back to the way I had them though, because I don't want to resend that many. It is a lot of bandwidth. I'm just going to go back down to my command real quick and make sure I did something on my side. Okay, I wanted to make sure that this was still in play. That's it though. Any questions? Keep in mind there's like a 15-second delay on the stream. So from here out, I'm just going to be answering a few questions if you have them. But otherwise, I really have nothing left to show. This was a straightforward conversion. As you can see, it was pretty painless. I'm going to wait a minute or two for questions if anyone has them. because this stream ended much quicker than I expected. Let me just type in chat here. Anyone have questions before I end the stream? Okay, questions going once. Okay, we have a question. Only when the speed hack detection is going to add. There is no speed hack detection because you cannot speed hack in this. You can't do it, period. Technically you could speed hack, I suppose, because sorry, that was wrong. You could technically speed hack if you know, I lied. I totally lied. You cannot speed hack in this. I'm sorry. I'm taking back what I just said. You can't actually speed hack with this, and the reason is because the server adds your inputs to the client received motor state count, right? And let's say you are speed hacking. So you add 3 inputs more than you normally add because you're trying to speed hack. They're all going to be added to the received client motor states. And the thing is the server only processes one of these per fixed update. And just to show you. So here under fixed update, the server will call process received client motor state. And you can see that if there is more than one received motor state, which will pretty much always be the case, it's only going to process one at a time. Therefore, the server will never process more than one state at a time, so it's impossible to speed hack. Now, what will happen is if the client does send an excessive amount of states, the server will first tell the client to slow their roll. It will tell them to send less states. And that's already in there, that's automatic. But the client ignores that because they want to cheat and they just keep sending states. Then what will actually happen is if you go to back to the command here, if excessive amount of states are being received on the server according to the maximum received client motor states, then the server will simply drop off the old states. And what will happen is it will cause a desync for the client because they're trying to cheat, because they're trying to send more states, and the server's like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm going to ignore some of these. So it's only going to hurt the hacker if they try to speed hack. The live stream is going to be available. I have a playlist. Let me link it. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to grab that. Okay, so there's the playlist to this stream series. This is part 5. Part 1 through 3 are about an hour long. Part 4 is really quick. And you have, of course, this one, part 5. To answer your question about the code will be available, but only to my supporters on the project tier. And I'm actually going to release the 2 milestones that we just covered, so the TCP and UDP, either today or tomorrow. So if you're a supporter, you can get that code. And what I plan on making next for this is, I actually made notes. If you can just give me a second to open them up here. Okay, so the next milestones for this project is to allow collision with other moving rigid bodies. Currently, you can't do that on this because the velocity of other rigid bodies are not sent to spectators. You're controlling your own rigid body, and the server is controlling it as well. And on the server, all the rigid bodies are non-kinematic or simulated, so they're going to bump into each other and whatnot. But on the client specifically, we're actually zeroing out the velocity. I'll show you here real quick. Let me just find it. On the client, we're actually zeroing out the velocity if they don't own the object, and that's because if you don't do that, then the objects will drift and they'll behave funny. So this is, again, this milestone is only for using rigid bodies to control your own object and to not bump into other controlled objects. But down the road, I will be covering how to do that as well. That's just going to be at a later date. That's actually the next milestone, but it's going to be a bit of a challenging one. I'm going to have to really think it over. So it'll probably be, be a few days until I can actually get a stream going for it. And once that's done, I'll release another update to the project. And after that, I'll be doing the same thing, except with character controllers and transforms. And that's going to be so much easier. I actually chose to do the hardest one first, which is rigid bodies. So once we get all the rigid body stuff done, I'm going to set one up for character controller, and then I'm going to set one up for just plain old transforms, and it's going to be so much easier. Yeah. Any other questions? I will wait 1 minute for any additional questions. I'll actually wait 2 minutes because I know you might have to type it out, so. Got about a minute left for any more questions. I'm going to give it 30 more seconds. Also, keep in mind, you can always connect with me on my Discord too, and I'll give you a link to that. Now, I might not necessarily be answering stuff like right away because I am busy and I do have an actual job. So I'm probably going to actually be working on my actual job later today. So I will try to answer questions. I do always try, but I am busy sometimes. Okay, there's my Discord if you want to hop in. All right, so it looks like we don't have any more questions. So I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Thank you everyone for watching, and feel free to join my Discord if you like.